This episode of Musical Hell is brought to you by Midnight Musicals. Welcome to the podcast Musical Underground. Thank you. Greetings, mortals. Welcome to another session of the Infernal Court in Musical Hell. I'm Diva, your judge, jury, executioner, and sweet Lucifer, the Lego movie has a lot to answer for. You make one genuinely good movie based on a toy brand, and suddenly everybody thinks they can grab something from the kids section at Target and make a blockbuster out of it. And if you're Greta Gerwig, you're probably right. But she is an exception in a subgenre that has cursed us with the Playmobil movie and our next offender, UglyDolls. In fairness, the origin story of the Ugly Doll line is, for lack of a better term, really cute. David Horvath drew an encouraging cartoon for his girlfriend and eventual wife, Sun Min Kim, who reciprocated by hand-sewing a stuffed doll of the character for him, and from there they built a reasonably successful franchise. I'm not sure if it's a brand I would consider turning into a movie, but the good folks at Illumination did, buying the feature film rights in 2011. 4 years later, the rights had been acquired by mid-budget studio STX Entertainment, who, unsurprisingly, also churned out the aforementioned Playmobil movie. So if this video falls victim to the copyright bots, we'll know who is to blame. The project still sat on the shelf for a couple more years before they started recruiting some big-name musical talent like Kelly Clarkson, Nick Jonas, Janelle Monáe, Pitbull, Lizzo, and more. But this list of above-the-title personalities couldn't convince people to see the movie, which promptly tanked in theaters. And it's pretty easy to see why. So let's examine the case of UglyDolls. The credits are set against a factory that looks kind of like what would happen if you took the openings to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Coraline, mixed them together, and skimmed off all the style. Every so often, one of the dolls being turned out fails to pass quality control, and it is promptly chucked down a chute by some Dr. Seuss hands. These are, of course, the titular Ugly Dolls, who wind up in the accordingly named Uglyville, where we are introduced to our main character Moxy, and our first sin couldn't be better.
Call it hope or faith, whatever. I just know in my heart it's the day I've waited forever.
You can almost feel the paint-by-numbers effect in this song. This is where our hero sings about their desires. Here is where we intersperse some expository dialogue. This is where we go into the rousing chorus. It's like someone watched Belle and said, let's do that, only really dull.
Stop the press, Ugly Dog is here. Story of the day of the month of the year.
Oh, and there's a rap break, because the kids these days love rap breaks, and we also have to justify Pitbull's presence in the cast. Moxy's one dream is to make it to the big world, where she will find a child of her very own to love and play with her. Ox, the mayor of Uglyville, is adamant in telling her that things like the big world and humans are mere myths.
It's just, haven't you ever felt like, even if you're happy, which I definitely am. I mean, I just spent an entire day singing about it.
I've already ranted at length on why ironic we're singing and its funny jokes ceased to be funny eons ago, and I don't feel like doing it again, so moving on. Moxy's hope that today will be the day she meets her new human is inevitably disappointed, and she sings a sad reprise about it, while Ox bemoans her faith in the big world and urges her friend Lucky Bat to talk some sense into her. But surprisingly, Lucky Bat's literal fortune cookie advice doesn't deter her.
Find your own truth. 6, 9, 25, 18, 36, 41.
Is being bad at fortune-telling Lucky Bat's designated thing in the Uglyverse, or is this just the best inciting incident they could come up with? A central problem of this movie is that, with the exceptions of main characters Moxy and Ox, the Ugly Dolls only have vague identities and not much narrative function. For example, Moxy has the idea to enter the pipe through which all the Ugly Dolls arrived in Uglyville and trace it back to its source. She drafts a handful of characters into helping her on this mission: Lucky Bat, Ugly Dog, Bobo, and Wage. None of them have any strong motivation to join Moxy on this quest. Wage and Lucky Bat in particular think it's a terrible idea, but they go along anyway because, well, they just do.
Oh, good. A terrifying void.
That's always a good sign.
The four of them have rough personalities. Wage is grumpy and cynical, Lucky Bat is shy and uncertain of himself, Ugly Dog fancies himself a suave dude, and Bobo is sweet but dumb, but not much individuality beyond that. And apart from Bobo, whose TARDIS pockets hold a humorous variety of items, they don't have any special skills or traits that prove useful, which, would have greatly helped the movie's stated premise of diversity being an asset. Moxy could have gone on this quest alone for all the difference her friends make. The tunnel takes the UglyDolls to the factory and a series of slides that look like some kind of pretentious video art piece about conformity. All the dolls wind up at the Institute of Perfection, which a handy exposition video explains is a quality control/training center where dolls are rigorously tested and, if they pass muster, are allowed through the portal to the big world.
Perfect dolls, you'll meet your child, and they'll hug and hold you fast.
The regular dolls are imprinted with identities as they enter the Institute, but Moxy's weirdness shorts out the computer, and all the ugly dolls baffle and horrify the pretty dolls, including the standard Mean Girl trio.
Is that supposed to be some kind of doll?
The MGT predict that the new arrivals will displease Lou, the Institute's high muckety muck, which is the cue for Lou himself to come in with sin number 4, the ugly truth.
You're much too short.
Too short.
You're way too thin.
Too thin.
Is that a blemish on your double chin?
Oh man.
If the opening number was the poor man's bell, this is the poor man's Mother Knows Best. The Uptown Funk-esque vibe doesn't really work with the sadistic lyrics, and neither does the animation. Also, the ugly dolls become downcast when Lou turns his criticism on them, which... why? As far as they've been concerned their whole lives, ugly is something to be celebrated. Moxy would probably feel shattered, sure, as she's informed her weirdness stands in the way of her dream, but Wade seems too cynical to be bothered, and Bobo too stupid. The other uglies are ready to give up and go home, but if Moxy did that, we wouldn't have a movie. She insists on being allowed in the Institute, and because of the Air Bud loophole, there's not a whole lot Lou can do about it. He is noticeably startled when Moxy mentions Ox, though, so he pretends to be magnanimous about the whole thing, while sending the Mean Girl trio on a clandestine mission and putting their awkward fourth wheel Mandy in charge of showing the new arrivals around.
So, you guys actually live in these boxes? Not that they're bad boxes. They're all neat and organized and straight.
Lou's first attempt at intimidation fails, as the uglies are pretty thrilled with the supply shed he's designated for their quarters. As for Mandy, she is quite sympathetic to the strangers, in no small part because she herself has a dark secret.
Ooh, cool glasses.
Which isn't exactly a secret if anybody around her pays any attention. Moxy gives her a bit of, "Your mild flaw is beautiful," which points for not having a guy tell her that at least. Meanwhile, the MGT sneak into Uglyville to kidnap Ox, which proves to be ridiculously easy. Day 1 at the Institute of Perfection, and Lou is giving a big speech about how his sadism is really a form of tough love necessary for his students to pass the final test before entering the big world, an obstacle course called the Gauntlet.
The gauntlet.
Lesson 1 is on avoiding stains, which sounds pretty much impossible for anything destined to wind up in the hands of a 6-year-old. The uglies are too busy having a glue fight to pay attention, so Lou makes an example of them by subjecting them to washing machine torture and a pentatonic-scored training montage. Despite Lou's insistence that Moxy and her friends will never be good enough, Moxy is determined and decides she needs to become pretty. So while the Mean Girl trio deliver Ox to Lou, so either that was a very long mission or we just witnessed a one-day training montage, Moxy spruces herself up with mixed results. Mandy comes around for a visit and, although she likes Moxy and her friends just as they are, offers to give them a proper makeover montage with sin number 5 all dolled up.
We'll scope and mold and change and fix you anyway.
This is a song that really wants to have its cake and eat it too. It wants Mandy to be the friendly local who accepts the uglies, but it also wants to be a House of Holbein-style commentary on all the painful and gross stuff people do to their bodies to conform to a narrow physical ideal. It might make sense if Mandy was feeling conflicted between the pretty-centered culture she had been raised in and her budding friendship with the nonconformist uglies, but she doesn't really have that kind of an arc. Not to mention the whole thing looks like something dredged out of a 1990s Saturday morning cartoon commercial break. As a result of Mandy's efforts, the Uglies, well, they look pretty much the same but with pretty style wigs and uniforms. The reaction to this attempt to fit in is pretty predictable, with Lou reiterating that they'll never pass the gauntlet.
The gauntlet!
A claim he backs up by bringing forward Ox himself.
What's he talking about?
Moxy, all I wanted to do was protect you.
See, once upon a time, Ox accidentally wound up going to the Institute of Perfection rather than down the reject portal, and he and Lou were once buddies, but Ox's presence was messing things up for the other dolls, so Lou showed Ox a pipe he claimed led to freedom, but really wound up in the recycling center where all the factory rejects were sent, leading Oz to believe he and the other Uglies were inherently unwanted and unlovable by humans. I have to say, the more I try to figure out the world building on this, the less it makes sense. It doesn't even have to be anything overly complicated. In the Cars movies, we can just take it as a given that in this particular universe, vehicles exist sans humans, and in Barbie, the doll world and the real world have a semi-symbiotic relationship explained just enough for the premise to work. But here, all I can think about is, where is this factory? Who runs it? Do they know about Lou, and if so, do they approve of his methods? What the here is going on here anyway? The end result of all of this is that Ox sealed up the recycling portal and rerouted the pipe to a safe haven where he founded Uglyville. Heartbroken, Moxy and her friends return to Uglyville, where the truth about the Uglies' origins spreads throughout the town and causes an economic depression? Sure, let's go with that. But in the midst of this angst, Mandy shows up because she needs Moxy to fight back against Lou's tyranny so dolls with mild flaws like her can have a chance. And she gets a big song that completely contradicts her big song from 10 minutes ago.
It's always gonna be someone saying you're something less. Let them talk, you know your heart.
Basically, this is just an excuse to give Kelly Clarkson and Janelle Monáe an inspiring duet. But at the conclusion of this uplifting number, the Mean Girl trio show up and kidnap Moxy and Mandy, delivering them to Lou. He's reopened the recycling portal as he's decided that Moxy will make her a perpetual threat to his perfect world order and therefore she must be destroyed. Oh, and Mandy too, because we're laying Lou's villainy on really, really thick at this point. Back in Uglyville, everyone is still depressed, with Even Wage having a big out-of-nowhere speech about how she really just wanted to be brave like Moxy. Ox goes to find Moxy to patch things up, only to find the aftermath of her abduction. Luckily, Moxy's printer is sentient and can communicate with pictures, by the way, fills him in, so he calls a rescue party to save her and Mandy from a good old-fashioned conveyor belt death trap. The two are pulled to safety via a long doll chain, and Moxy and Ox both realize that Lou's quest for perfection endangers them all and they must make a stand. Their differences make them unique, yada yada, let your freak flag fly, and I'm not kidding, she actually says those words. So everyone marches down to the arena where the gauntlet is being held, much to Lou's consternation.
Hello, old friend.
But he quickly recovers, announcing that Moxy and her friends can run the gauntlet, but he and the MGT will race against them. The gauntlet itself is a recreation of a human dwelling where dolls must evade robotic versions of dangers like dogs and vacuum cleaners and escape through the pet door at the end. Lou, who is cashing in all his obviously evil chips at this point, wastes no time in throwing his allies to the proverbial and sometimes literal hounds, and finally horrifies the spectators by kicking a robot baby in the face and causing it to cry. Meanwhile, Moxy has made it to the finish line with the aid of teamwork and is finally within sight of her goal.
It's okay. Don't cry. You'll be okay.
Turns out this enables Moxy and company to loophole their way to victory as they have fulfilled a doll's true purpose by bringing a child comfort and happiness. Meanwhile, Lou crosses the finish line but is rejected, prompting his second villain rant in 15 minutes.
I'm the model, the mold, sent by the factory to help guide you through. Sounds amazing, right? Wrong! Prototypes are not meant for public consumption.
So yeah, Lou is bitter and angry because he can never go to the big world while flawed dolls like Ox can, and he secretly sabotaged Ox's attempts at the Institute while pretending to be his friend. Deciding that if he can't get out, nobody can, Lou goes to destroy the portal, while Ox fights him off and goes all, "You were my brother, Anakin," on him, and there are at least one too many climaxes in this movie. Lou is subdued, and even his mean girl trio are done with him, and he gets carted off to the washing machine as punishment. But it's too late, for the portal has been broken, and Moxy's dreams seem likewise destroyed.
There's a child for every doll, but I guess that's not quite true.
But in a show of solidarity, all the dolls join to gather the pieces up and put them back together, and when Moxy puts in the last bit, which Lord of Darkness help me is actually shaped like a heart, the whole thing reboots.
Then become what you are and you'll set yourself free.
And so Uglyville and Perfection join together to form Imperfection, and the portal is always open so dolls can go out into the big world and come back and visit their friends while the children sleep. And of course, Moxy finally gets a child of her very own. UglyDolls doesn't feel like a reject exactly, more like a half-baked idea that needed to go through a few more drafts to work the kinks out. Its heart is in the right place, but the let's hear it for the weirdos thing has been done often and better. As it is, it's mediocre and forgettable, so the Court of Musical Hell condemns the producers to be reincarnated as objects in the Goodwill Toys section. So let it be recorded. This session of the Infernal Court in Musical Hell is now adjourned.